Welcome to Section 3, Drag and Drop for iPad and iPhone. In this section, we're going to take a look at implementing the drag delegate on a UITableView. We're also going to look at doing the drop delegate on a UITableView. Then we'll discuss using a drop proposal and creating a drag preview. Drag delegate on a UITableView. In this video, we're going to take a look at how to implement dragging data out of a UITableView and also providing data to an ItemProvider. So we're here running the My Notes application alongside reminders in the iPad Pro 9.7-inch simulator. We're going to be talking about the drag delegate this lesson, but I wanted to show you that you actually get some drag functionality for free just by using things like text fields. So we can actually highlight all of this text, and if I click and hold on it, which is the same as pressing with your finger, I am able to drag this text around, and I can even drag it in and make a reminder with the text I highlighted. So we get that functionality for free in iOS 11 just by the fact that we have a text field here that we can type text into. What we're going to do now though is we want to actually be able to drag an entire note into reminders. And right now I can't do that. I can drag up and down in my table view, but I can't actually drag out a cell. So that's what we're going to implement right now. And it's actually very straightforward and easy to do. So let's go into Xcode. All of the code we're going to add is in our master view controller, which is the class that is controlling that table view that shows all of our notes. So the first thing we need to do is add the UITableView drag delegate. So we're now declaring that this class is going to conform to that delegate. Xcode is going to complain for a moment because we don't have all of the required methods implemented. But before we actually add the required method, what I want to do is come down to the bottom of viewDidLoad, and we need to actually set the fact that this class will be the drag delegate for the table view. So we need to tell the table view that its drag delegate is going to be self. So this sets up that all of the messages for the drag delegate should be sent to this particular class. So let's scroll down a little bit and let's actually put this code right here in between our memory warning and our create new note function. The only method we need to implement to actually be able to implement drag or dragging out a table cell and getting its data to another application like reminders that we showed a moment ago. In order to do that, the only function that we actually need is the TableView items for beginning session. This is called whenever a DragSession is initiated by the operating system, or recognized by the operating system, I should say, as initiated by the user. So when the user taps and holds onto a table cell, then that table cell will start to lift. It'll start a lifting animation to give the user visual feedback that they're starting a drag. But also this function is called, and you are passed in the table view that this drag session is starting within. You're also told about the actual session in progress and also the index path for the cell. In this case, we have just a very simple implementation we're going to do is that we're going to check and make sure we have all our notes, grab the particular note for the cell that's being dragged, and then hand that data off to the operating system as part of an NS ItemProvider, which is an object that lets us stick some data in there that can then be passed off and asynchronously loaded by any other application that can handle the type of object that we're passing through to it. So the first thing I said we need to do is we need to guard against being able to get all of our notes. We're going to go ahead and get the latest notes from our model, and we do that by doing our getAllNotes function inside of our model class. And this can be nil, so it's possible that we don't have any notes or couldn't access the database. Actually, if it's null here, it means you couldn't access the database. So if we can't access the database, we're just going to return an array of UI drag items that is empty. So we're going to be creating an item provider to stick our data in, but that item provider needs to be wrapped up inside of a drag item. If we return an empty array of drag items, that's telling iOS that we weren't able to get any data to drag at that time, and then the drag will just be canceled out from under the user because something went wrong, or we weren't able to get the data, or we aren't allowing the data in this case to be dragged. Once we have all our notes, we need to make sure that we can actually get the note that we need as part of handing the data off to the system. So we're going to go to our My Notes model again and get a note with the particular ID, and we're going to grab that ID by going into the All Notes variable that we just made, and we're going to then pass in the index paths row as subscript to be able to get that particular note, and then we're going to grab the ID for that note. So that is basically asking our model class to get the particular note with that ID and return it back to us. Now this can fail because we could have an incorrect ID, or the note could not be there anymore. Any number of things could happen. So if we're not able to get that note, then we need to again return an array of UI drag items that is empty, meaning that we weren't able to actually get anything for the user to drag. Now if we make it past these two guard statements, then we need to actually do two things left before we'll actually have our drag implemented. First thing is we need to make an instance of ItemProvider. So we're going to make a note ItemProvider variable and make it an instance of ItemProvider. And inside there, we're going to pass an object to ItemProvider as part of its initialization. The object we pass through has to implement ItemProvider writing. This is an Objective-C protocol that allows the operating system to be able to gather the data together that it needs in a way that it can then pass this data around to other applications. Now, our My Notes application just stores string data as far as the data that we're going to be dragging around. It's just going to be the note title and the note text. Because it's just a string information, the object that we can pass through is an NS string. So we are coding in Swift. Strings in Swift are structs, but we can't pass a Swift struct through because that's not an object. Pardon me, it's not an Objective-C object, which is required for this Objective-C protocol. So what we're going to do is create our note data that we want to pass through, grab the title and the text, wrap that in an NS string to send it to the item provider. One thing to note, if you have a custom data type that you are using as the data that you want to actually have dragged out of your application, then you need to actually implement the NSItemProvider writing protocol for whatever data type you want to pass through to NSItemProvider. In this case, we're not going to talk about implementing that protocol, but that is something you can do yourself to be able to implement your own data types to be able to do dragging with those. What we're going to do here is we're going to actually make a string, and the string we're going to make is going to consist of our notes title with a colon and then the notes text. So just very straightforward, simple way of getting the data out. And I do need to cast this to an NS string. Again, that's because NSItemProvider is expecting an Objective-C object. Because it is an Objective-C protocol, an object that adheres to that protocol is what it's expecting. So casting that to an NS string. Now that we have an ItemProvider instance, we can return an array of UI drag items. We're only going to return one item though, and that one item is going to have our ItemProvider inside of it. So that is actually it for implementing our drag. Let's very quickly add a note here to say that this is our drag implementation. Then let's go ahead, and I actually have the app still running from when we first showed it, so I'm going to stop the application from running and then run it again so we can test this. So we have our note here, and if we just drag in from the left, we can actually look at our master view controller here, and we can take our sum notes, or let's do test note this time. We've already done sum notes over here. So you can take our test notes, tap and hold on it, and now we have the cell that we can drag around, and I can drag it over into reminders. We get a nice little plus to indicate that we're going to add this data, drop it, and now we have test note : type your note text here, woohoo! So you can see that we have the title for our note, a colon, and the data. So that's it for implementing drag in our application.